The Caste Equity Legal Task Force is a national coalition of litigators, law professors, bar associations, legal advocates, and law school students committed to ending caste discrimination. We advocate for laws and policies that address caste discrimination to protect and support its victims. We provide resources, best practices, and continuing legal education credits to attorneys and other service providers working with victims of caste discrimination. The fight for caste equity is one of the most important civil rights movements of our time, and our mission is to win.
In the American context, caste has a particular history. One of the huge things about the United States that you don't really get in India, you don't really get in the UK, because the UK, for the most part, didn't have chattel slavery, but you do get in the US. When slavery was abolished in the 1860s in the US had to decide what to do with these newly freed people. How do we treat them? What are their legal rights are? And more particularly, what is it we're trying to prevent? What is the goal of what we're trying to do? And as early as the 1830s, the situation of Black people in the United States, both in the North where they were free, but still subject to tremendous race discrimination, disenfranchisement, and segregation, and in the South where they were enslaved, Northern abolitionists would compare and contrast the treatment of Black people here to the caste system on South Asia. So there's a history of the use of the caste system in South Asia that starts with the 1830s. It continues throughout the 1840s, 1850s. There's a famous legal case, Roberts versus Boston, which is an 1849 case, the first American case to deal with the issue of school segregation, where there the attorney representing the Black plaintiff drew heavily on the caste analogy in making his argument that segregation was illegal because it was like a caste system. And that attorney was Charles Sumner. And Charles Sumner will become the leading radical Republican during the time of Reconstruction in the United States. So for the US, our first anti-discrimination law passed by Congress was the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which Senator Charles Sumner is one of the leading voices in Congress at the time talking about it. And he extensively makes the argument during the debates of the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which is still in force today, and is one of our major anti-discrimination statutes. But he made the argument that the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was intended to attack the caste system or caste-like systems that existed in South Asia. And he drew a direct analogy between the Brahmins in South Asia and whites here, and then Black people and low-caste Hindus in India. But a number of other senators during the debate of the Civil Rights Act of 1866 also talked about the caste analogy, the treatment of Black people, comparing it to the Indian caste system. So it's important to draw upon that legal history when talking about caste in the United States, because it means Dalits already have the groundwork laid for a conclusion that caste discrimination is a form of anti-discrimination.
I think the place to start as a baseline is the American, and that includes California, legal system comes from the English common law system. And if you start way back then, a few centuries ago, there was no protection against discrimination based on any characteristics. Didn't matter race, gender, anything. You could be fired from your job or evicted from your apartment for any reason, including your race. That's the reason why over time, Congress and the states, including California, have adopted constitutional amendments and legislation prohibiting discrimination on various specific grounds. But the law has to spell out what those protected characteristics are otherwise they're not protected. So if we talk about federal law, the main statute a lot of people talk about is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination in employment based on race, color, religion, national origin, and sex. And then you can add to that the Americans with Disabilities Act, prohibiting disability discrimination, the Age Discrimination Act, and there are a few others. All of them lay out specific characteristics for which discrimination is prohibited. There's also the Civil Rights Act of 1866, a long time ago in our framework, which granted all persons within the U.S. the rights that are, quote, enjoyed by white citizens. Focusing specifically on California, there are several statutes of the sort I've been talking about, which specify certain grounds on which discrimination is prohibited. One of them, maybe the broadest one, is called the UNRRA Civil Rights Act. And it says that all, quote, all persons within the jurisdiction of this state are free and equal. And no matter what their sex, race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, and then name several other categories, no matter, they're entitled to the full and equal accommodations, advantages, facilities, privileges, or services in all business establishments of every kind whatsoever. So it's a very broad anti-discrimination law, but notice that it also lists all these specific categories. Another law in California is the Fair Employment and Housing Act, which does the same thing with respect to employment and housing specifically, and that has the same kind of list of race, color, sex, national origin, etc. So those are the kinds of laws we're dealing with in the state of California. They have these specific prohibitions on discrimination based on specific categories. And there's some others that include participation in state benefit programs, education, licensing, some other fields, but they all have these specific lists. What's important to understand is that up to now, none of these federal or state laws has included caste as an explicit category that's legally protected.
We all know as minorities in America that whatever it is that we think about race, when we step out into American society, for everyone else around us, we have a race. Similarly, when you step out into any space where caste exists, you will be assumed to have a caste, whether you like it or not. You know, a lot of us come from backgrounds where we want to see the category of caste annihilated, but we still step out into society and caste is assumed and we become victims of caste prejudice. But at the same time, it's really important to remember that someone doesn't need to have a caste to discriminate against someone else. So all you need to discriminate against someone on the basis of caste is caste prejudice. The purpose of these laws isn't to make someone identify their caste or isn't to point out that people have castes. It's almost the opposite. It's to make sure that no one is prevented from access to full and equal rights, benefits, or privileges because of someone else's caste-based prejudices. You will never be required to self-identify as a result of a bill. You can if you want, but you will never be required to do it. It's not about someone's individual caste identity. These laws are not about your caste. They're about someone else's prejudice. So someone can be prejudiced against you based on your caste without knowing their own caste, as long as they have, or without even having a caste, so long as they have ideas about, say, some castes are purer than others, or some castes are dirty.
The same is true of LGBTQ, clearly. I mean, are they born LGBTQ? Who knows? Do they manifest somehow that they are? Maybe not. It's a question of how the people are treating them distinctly from others.
I don't accept that I have a caste, but I fully accept that I am discriminated because of that status. And I fully accept that I need laws to protect me, as much as I accept that I might face discrimination as a woman or as a person of color. Organizations that are Dalit-led and that are women-led often get hit with a certain kind of violence and a certain kind of hatred that, for me, just reinforce the fact that this struggle is real. There's so many women powering this movement who are South Asian. And for me, I found such a deep connect to the South Asian community when I think, okay, these women are my leaders. These are the women that speak for me. And to see the leaders of my community, the South Asian community writ large, and I know people who are casted, who would feel the same way, who would look at these women as their leaders, right?
We need to remember that hate speech is not the same thing as calling out historical oppression and bigotry. And in no way, shape, or form does Equality Labs categorically demonize any group or practice. In fact, if you look at the Equality Labs report in 2018, you can go directly to page 30, where it explicitly states, despite origins in Hinduism and Hindu scripture, caste is not a Hindu problem.
One fact that I really liked that really reflected my sense of spirituality and religious attachment, which is that I think only 6% of Hindus look to religious texts and scriptures to answer moral issues. The majority of Hindus look toward science and common sense and reason.
All South Asian religious organizations in the US must commit to the eradication of caste-based division amongst our leadership and its memberships. Our missions, boards, ceremonial, charitable, and value processes must explicitly maintain that caste-based discrimination will not be tolerated. This is the same message when we talk about being anti-racist. Now, just replace that with anti-casteist. That's what the organization is calling for.
There are a lot of people trying to push these foreign ideas of what Hinduism is onto Hindus and saying like, all Hindu Americans must love Diwali. I'm from South India. I'm a Hindu, I'm from South India, and my Hindu tradition is to think that Diwali is a really, really racist holiday because it celebrates the defeat of a South Indian king by a North Indian king, and it has horrible racist depictions of South Indian Hindus.
Equality Labs does not demonize vegetarianism. If you look at the report, specifically pages 23 and 24, they explain that the politicization of food choices and the historical context of occupation is the root of this concept. Many Dalit communities, for example, were forced to traditionally work with animals, disposing of carcasses, or processing animal-based products such as leather. And so the caste enforced proximity to animal death and meat is fundamentally the reason for their perceived untouchability. There's a deep inherent injustice here, and that's why food preferences matter. Equality Labs was formed to free Dalit people from caste oppression. So while it's not the sole mission, Equality Labs does advocate for a contextualized history of the Dalit people, right? And so members of all protected categories have to continuously combat the erasure of both their past oppression and their past accomplishments. Women, people of color, LGBTQIA individuals have long grappled with the lack of representation in history. First of all, the Carnegie Endowment focused on Indian Americans and Equality Labs focused on immigrants from all South Asian ethnic immigrant groups, including Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Iran, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, and other indentured communities, right? So your population is different. Next, the Carnegie Endowment report only asked questions of caste to Hindu participants, despite caste practices existing in all religious communities, especially since faiths like Islam, Christianity, and Sikhs have large numbers of caste-oppressed people. But the lack of longitudinal data does not automatically mean that the study lacks reliability or credibility, just that more credibility would come if you had more of these studies, which is actually exactly what we're arguing for. So the irony is that without caste-based protections, we will be confined to this kind of research since subjects are fearful of coming out. So that myth perpetuates the very issue about which it complains. Even if it did use snowball sampling, this myth fails to provide the context for using snowball sampling, or sometimes it's called chain referral sampling, in caste oppressed circles. So very similar to the rights of LGBTQIA Americans, coming out with your caste background poses extraordinary risks due to immigration or fear of violence, right? So minority communities often only communicate through whisper or underground networks to access resources without fear of unemployment or retaliation. I think the National Library of Medicine is probably the best source where you can understand that snowball sampling, it's qualitative, it's foundational research. It's a method that's used to reach hard to reach populations. It's directional. It's a call for more research. It's not definitive as the end all be all research finding. Honestly, by this standard, any educator on matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion should either not speak out against systemic injustice or not charge for their expertise and coaching to fight such injustice. We would never accuse Black scholars who are paid for their DEI and racial equity workshops as having conflicts of interest if they raise matters of racism in the workplace. These trainings are professional, educational services that should be compensated, and it has nothing to do with the fight for equality.
There's a very small fringe vocal group of Hindus who are trying to tell me what my Hinduism is. And they're attacking people who represent my version of Hinduism, not, or at least my spirituality and my sense of community. And it upsets me. And I really think Americans are smarter than allowing a fringe to dictate the interests and the wishes of the majority. I feel really proud when I see fellow South Asian Americans coming out and asserting their own sense of Hinduism. I really hope that at the end of the day, we see reason in all of this.